One of the conditions of our precious human life is our having interest in the Dharma, our having faith and spiritual yearning. And that's something that is very important to appreciate within ourselves, because many people may have those questions but suppress them, or get distracted by other things, or just not be interested in anything beyond the perception of this life and the happiness of this life. So the fact that we have that interest, that we're earnest, that we want to explore it, that's something we should definitely respect in ourselves and respect in each other, and appreciate in ourselves and appreciate in each other. Because that wish to make our life meaningful is, a very important element in the whole spiritual path. Without it, we may have all the other good conditions, but nothing's going to happen. Okay, so to appreciate and nourish that part of ourselves, to respect it in others, and then, through nourishing it, to really let it go forward and blossom. And we do that by learning and then training our mind in cultivating renunciation of samsara, cultivating love, compassion, and bodhicitta, and cultivating the correct view of reality. And so for the benefit of all beings, may we aim for peerless awakening through developing this interest and earnestness in the Dharma that we have. So I think very important to respect and appreciate that part of ourselves, not put ourselves down, not to appreciate ourselves, but to respect and appreciate that in ourselves and also in others. Because often the people we practice with have very, very different personalities than we do, and if we just concentrate on the superficial differences, but if we look deeper into people's hearts, we'll see that their whole aim and purpose in life is the same as ours, and that, becomes a really valid basis for respecting and honoring and cherishing others, and extending that to ourselves as well, not in an inflated way of I'm special, but just to appreciate that we happen, this lifetime to have that interest. Because I just keep thinking of all the people in Bodh who go there to sell Buddhist trinkets. The holiest place on earth, and all they think of is how much I can sell today. Which I think is quite sad. Okay, so there's a few different things I wanted to talk about some more about monastic mind. We've covered a lot of them, but there's a few more. So, or just to emphasize the ones we've touched on before. So really humility, and to see that humility and low self-esteem are totally different, okay? We can have humility when we have self-confidence. When we lack self-confidence, it's difficult to be humble. Now, because when we lack self-confidence, we feel less than, and so how do we cover it up? By being arrogant and broadcasting our good qualities and wanting to be somebody. Yeah? When we really have confidence in ourselves, we don't have that need to be somebody in front of other people, and we're content just, we can be humble like that. So I think low self-esteem and arrogance go together, and humility and self-confidence go together. And I really see that. I know I talk a lot about His Holiness Dalai Lama, but, I remember one conference in 1989. It was right after he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and there was a conference in Irvine, California, where he was on a panel with other people, and, the other people were all experts, and he was the expert of the experts. And I forget what they were talking about, but the people looked to His Holiness and said, well, what do you think about this issue? And he paused, and he thought, and then he said, I don't know. What do you think? And the room was silent. The expert of the experts said, I don't know. How often in the West do you hear an expert say, I don't know? Forget it, Let's make up something. Yeah, we can't say we don't know. We have to make up something or humiliate the person who asked the question or change the topic or anything but say, I don't know. And there was His Holiness just saying, I don't know. And asking other people what they thought and really sincerely wanting to know what they thought. Okay, so I think that happens because when, he can do that because he has actual self-confidence. Okay, another trait we want to cultivate as monastics is modesty. Yeah, so we don't go around. It comes it's a correlate of humility. We don't go around, extrapolating on all of our good qualities and everything we've done and, to impress other people. Yeah. Of course, there are times when we need to share information. People need to know what we've done in the past and what our experience is and so on. And that's fine to share it, in Dharma circles or in worldly circles. I mean, you have to share that kind of stuff. But you can do it in a modest way instead of, look at me. Yeah. And, this is very counter to, in the West, what we're taught, isn't it? Yeah, we're taught when you go for a job interview just to, the famous thing in the job interview is, I have just a little bit of experience, code for I don't know anything about it. I have a little bit of experience, but I'm a fast learner and very eager to learn. Code for you should definitely hire me. Even though I don't know it. Yeah. Okay? So, it's so funny how we're supposed to kind of fudge and present this image, even though it's not true. And then, of course, people hire us, and we can't do what we were hired for. Yeah? This is very curious, how that works. I remember when my niece, this is many years ago, was filling out her college application, and they asked her, to talk about herself, what kind of person are you or something. And I had the nerve, can you imagine this, to say, well, why don't you talk also about your weaknesses? Oh, she and her mother were furious at me. How dare you suggest that she has weaknesses? Because I was saying, if I were looking at somebody, I would really see it as a virtue if somebody who could acknowledge their weaknesses, not putting themselves down, but acknowledge their weaknesses and acknowledge their strengths. And that would make me actually have more respect for somebody. As, oh, they were so upset with me. Yeah. They ask and then you say, oh, well, some small thing, Yes, right, yeah. I work too hard.
Really hardworking, independent, but you'll always do what management says.
Right.
And then you go off your own, but you have a lot of energy.
Yes. Yes. Hardworking and independent, but you always follow the rules. Right. Okay. Okay. Then another quality in a monastic mind is genuine self-confidence, not putting on a facade of pride. And then another quality is the ability to listen to others with our heart. To really stop and listen to what somebody's saying and to hear what they're really saying inside. Because very often what people say with their mouth is not what they're really trying to express. And so to learn to listen with our heart of, well, what is the person really meaning or wanting or needing when they say X, Y, and Z. And to do that, we really have to pause and take an interest in the other person and put ourselves aside. So that's an important quality. The ability to tolerate different ideas. Yeah. Even about such things as where to put the recycling bin. Yeah, you have to be able to tolerate different ideas on these incredibly important topics. Or how to clean the refrigerator. Or, how to water the flower garden. You can't imagine how many different views there are on how to water the garden. We go through it each year. And at some point you just give up. Okay, not being self-indulgent. Definitely for a monastic. Very important that we're not self-indulgent. Especially because lay people are supporting us, and lay people are also looking to us as examples of practitioners. So if we're very self-indulgent, we sleep until 10 o'clock in the morning and, don't have strength or energy to do this or that, and we're overeating and, whatever, then it's not good for our mind, and it doesn't help other people's minds either. Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of renunciation, isn't it? Yeah. So this involves really looking at all of our old habits of how we seek comfort. How when we feel a little bit stressed or a little bit edgy or a little bit lonely or a little bit confused, what are our strategies, our usual strategies for dealing with these things? And so some of these things we're not allowed to do because of the precepts, and then and then others you can do, but you really have to look and say, on my part, is this being self-indulgent, or is it being wise and learning how to, if I'm really stressed out or whatever, how to calm myself down. But to really look at what we do, Do we take out the comic books when we're stressed and feel depressed? I had one friend, whenever he got on edge, he read novels. And he, would read one novel after the other. I don't know how many trashy novels in a few days. And that's, completely going into another realm, to handle those things. So, and then some people just eat compulsively, and some people exercise compulsively, and, so we all have our own thing. And, just trying to moderate it a little bit, especially if it's something that's really gross. As a monastic, one popular thing in society is you go shopping. Yeah? When you feel edgy, when you feel stressed, you go shopping and you buy yourself a present. Yeah? So our precepts kind of prevent that. So then maybe you start planning, well, there's some really nice fabric in the room, and, how can I make another robe, even though I have so many already? It's amazing the way things come out. Okay, then another important quality is respecting others, giving and receiving respect. Okay, so, important to respect others and to point out others' good qualities. And this is a really good daily training practice for us to do, to give ourselves the assignment of every day I have to say like 5, nice things to somebody. Yeah. So 5 different people I have to, verbally express something I appreciate about them. And to give ourselves that kind of assignment, it can be really good, to respecting others. And then also learning how to accept respect. I remember when I first started teaching, and then people would come up to me afterwards and say, oh, that talk was so good. And then I would go, oh, no. I felt very uncomfortable with it. So I asked one of my Dharma friends, what do you do, when somebody comes up to you and says, oh, that talk was so good? And he said, you say thank you. And I thought, duh, yeah. I mean, because I'm sitting there going, no, it wasn't really good. I didn't articulate myself well. I probably made a lot of mistakes. And that is like, somebody has a virtuous mind and a happy mind, and they're trying to share it. And when we go, oh, no, blah, 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 it's like refusing, what they're giving us. They're giving us a gift, and we're saying, no, I don't deserve it. So, it really made me stop and think, and yes, all I have to do is say thank you. And that's it, meaning I accept what they gave, and what I think of my own ability is something else. Okay? Also, along receiving respect, when depending where you are in Asia, very often, and it happens here too once in a while, people will bow to you. That's kind of a customary greeting, and especially if someone's your teacher, you bow when you first meet them. And and at first, if you're a monastic, it's a little bit like, why are they bowing to me? And then you have to realize they're not bowing to me. Yeah, they're bowing to the robes. Yeah, they're bowing to the robes that the Buddha wore. And so you imagine a Buddha in your heart, and they're bowing to the Buddha in your heart. They're appreciating the monastic robes. Because that kind of respect really has nothing to do with us. Yeah, has nothing to do with us. So, if people give it, it benefits them. If people don't give it, it doesn't harm us. Then another quality of a monastic mind is questioning our own thoughts and perceptions. Yeah, so when we're stuck in some way of thinking, to be able to press the pause button and step back and think, evaluate, is what I'm thinking realistic? Yeah, is it beneficial? Is it accurate? Or am I making up my old stories? Because, we all have our old stories, particular emotional patterns that we have, and behind each emotional pattern, there's a story, there's a way of thinking or perceiving things. And to become aware of these, and when am I just playing my old movie? Okay, so for example, somebody comes up, and we're doing some job, and they ask us a question about our job, and we immediately go into defense mode. They're criticizing me. Yeah, and the ability to stop and say, somebody just asked me a question. Why is that? Why am I thinking they're asking a question? Means that they're criticizing me, that I'm doing something wrong. This is a habit of how I've interpreted these kinds of events for years and years throughout my lifetime. I don't like to be questioned about anything because I just immediately go into their criticizing me because I don't have any self-confidence. But they're not criticizing me. They're just asking a question for information. Yeah? So being able to see those things, those patterns that we have. Or sometimes, we have all sorts of things. I think, like I told you about the one man who was here, and when he walked into a room, if people didn't stop and say hello and welcome, he felt so like, oh, these people are so cold. That's what they did in his family, but that's how he interpreted the situation of, oh, they don't care about me, they're so cold. Actually, that wasn't the situation at all. People were busy doing their job. Yeah? So to learn, when we are making up a story, and to really see, because we all have our favorite videos, our favorite emotional mental videos that we play over and over and over again ad nauseum. Yeah? And to start to question those. Yeah? Another example of another video, somebody else that we live with is unhappy, and we think it's my fault. Yeah, I must have said or done something, that's why they're unhappy. Yeah, it's my fault. Really? Like we're so important that we're the one who always makes everybody unhappy? Yes! I am. I have that capacity. No, it's just an old habitual way of interpreting things that has nothing to do with the actual situation. Okay, so beginning to notice these things in ourselves and question them. And really see how sometimes, we're creating a reality for ourselves that is so not real. That's why when people leave here and they say going back to the real world, I say, no, you're going back to the unreal world. Here is where we're trying to get real. Okay. And drop this kind of stuff. Okay, so you need to look at that, because definitely when you live in a community, it comes up over and over and over again. And then people are going to start pointing it out to you. Yeah? Right? Community members? True? Yeah, they all see it. And, and they point it out. And, it's a good opportunity for us to look inside and say, they're right. And I keep digging myself this particular ditch again and again and again. And it's making me miserable. Yeah. I've got to fill in this ditch and put a board over it that says, "Do not dig here." Yeah. Okay, another question, or another quality in monastic life is not blaming others for our own unhappiness. So being responsible. Yeah, when I'm unhappy, it is my responsibility to remedy my own unhappiness. I don't go and blame everybody and accuse them of being unfriendly and accuse them of not caring about me and, doing my self-pity story, crying, I'm unhappy, come on, I need some self-pity. Instead, we become responsible for our own emotions. And when we're out of whack, we can verbalize it and say to the community, like I told you, when Venerable Tarpa did that one time in the community meeting and said, I've been in a really bad mood and angry, and a lot of you have been the objects of it, then you just say it, and there it is, and you're not saying, and it's your fault, or it's your responsibility to make me feel better. Yeah. I'm in a bad mood, so please do a tap dance to make me feel better. Yeah. And then, then it becomes manipulating, don't we? Isn't it? I'm like, and it's your job to do something. Yeah. Make my favorite food. Tell me I'm beautiful. Whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. This is where it's very helpful to have a sense of humor. Yeah? Okay. Then another part of monastic mind is to really be aware of causes and consequences. How our actions create our karma for the future, so how our present actions are creating our future, and also how our present actions influence the people around us. And really thinking about, what we're doing and what the results are of what we're doing. And there's a beautiful article on our website in the prison section, an article written by Bo Flack, and he talks about causes and consequences. This is one man, he's out now, but he was in for a 20-year sentence for drug dealing because he was dealing like really heavy stuff, He was a very prominent drug dealer, and he got busted and, put him away for 20 years. And he was going, why? What happened? How did I get here? That was after he got done with being mad at all of his friends who betrayed him once he was arrested. All of his drug friends who were supposed to stick up for him and watch his property while he was in prison, but they sold it or they confiscated, So after he got over that, then he was really looking, and he was looking back in his whole life about decisions he made even when he was like 8 and 9 years old, and how that decision put him in this situation where he made another decision, which put him in another situation where he made another decision. And to trace, how did he become this big drug businessman, and wind up in the can? So it was a real eye-opener for him. And his article was really quite, it was quite beautiful. I took it out of a letter he wrote. I didn't put all the details in. But, for us to also, too, to really see how our own actions create what we're going to experience in the future, what we're experiencing now, and also how our actions influence the people around us. Yeah? And it's so funny. We're always so puzzled when we're in a bad mood and we complain and we get angry at people. We're so puzzled why they all stay away from us. Yeah? You ever realize that? It's like, I'm in a bad mood and I'm angry. And why are they all avoiding me? They're so unfriendly. They don't care about me at all. Of course I'm angry because they don't care about me. And then we let them know how much they don't care about us. And then they avoid us even more. And we go, why? Why? You know, so it's very helpful sometimes to really stop and, you know, how are my actions influencing this situation? Okay, then another quality of monastic mind is not power over others, but power over afflictions. Okay, having power over others, useless, you know, in terms of the Dharma. If you have a non-virtuous mind, having power over others will lead you to the lower realms. If you have a virtuous mind, being able to influence others in a good way is very useful. Okay? But to have power for power's sake, because we like being in charge and feeling important, and being recognized and so on, you know, and then that often turns into abuse. And they're really seeing now, they're doing a lot of studies that people in positions of power have less empathy. Yeah? They're, you know, of course, I mean, I'm sure the Buddha could have told them before they spent $2 million doing that research. But, you know, the research helps. We have some statistics now, right? But yeah, that people who have power over others often have less empathy. The power seems to make them immune to understanding other people's feelings. So as a monastic, having that mind becomes a disaster. Yeah, becomes a real disaster, because then, I mean, it could be really harming the people who rely on you spiritually. If you kind of revel in your own power, then it can really damage them. Okay, so always remember the power we want to have is power over our afflictions. Our afflictions, it looks... yeah, if there's a teacher who's very filled with themselves and has a lot of power, and then sends this person, you know, makes everybody their servants for this and that and the other thing, you know, to increase their own reputation instead of teaching them the Dharma. Okay. Yeah, so really power over our own afflictions. And then also another quality is to be able to think in a very long-term and a very broad way. Okay? So not just thinking about ourselves, but thinking about everybody else, you know, in the community or in the situation. Not just thinking about that, but also thinking about all sentient beings. Yeah, how is what I'm saying, doing, and thinking going to influence all other sentient beings? And also not just thinking in the short term, but thinking in the long term. You know, how is this going to affect others and myself in the long term? So really opening our mind instead of, my happiness now, it's the happiness of all sentient beings for a long time in the future. Okay. That actually, I forgot, let me go on a small side trip here. The topic of making decisions, how we make decisions, somebody just brought it up before. And so I wanted to share with you 2 criteria I use for making decisions. Yeah, and I'm sharing these with you because otherwise it would be a really interesting discussion group to have everybody share, you know, what criteria they use for making decisions. But we don't have time to have that discussion group right now. So I'll cheat and I'll tell you what I think. So 2 things I use. First is what situation will enable me to keep ethical conduct the best. You know, like there's many different options and things I could do. In which one of them will I be able to keep my ethical conduct the best? And which one of them could really take me away from ethical conduct? And then second, in which situation will I be able to benefit others the most? And not just thinking others, that particular person in that situation, but others meaning all sentient beings for the long term. Yeah, so I guess another way of saying it, in which situation would it help me cultivate bodhicitta and live according to bodhicitta? Yeah, thinking about the long-term welfare of all sentient beings. And so I find those 2 criteria very, very helpful when trying to make a decision about, do I do this, do I do that, do I go here, do I go there? Yeah. Because, you know, usually our criteria, well, what's your usual criteria? Oh, what?
Oh, what will I enjoy the most?
Yeah, what will I enjoy the most? And yeah. Oh, yeah, right. What will I enjoy the most that is still socially acceptable? Or if it's not, how can I enjoy it the most and not have anybody find out about it? Yeah. So that's our usual criteria. And, you know, where does that get us? Yeah. What will I enjoy the most? Or where will I experience the least discomfort? It's like both of these situations are not so unpleasant. Which one is the least unpleasant? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so having that big mind and, you know, making wise decisions. And then keeping the 4 immeasurables in our mind, cultivating them as much as possible. Very important part of having a monastic mind. You know, making our mind soft and receptive. You know, this morning, where I meditate, I have a direct view out the window on the one side. So, you know, when it started raining, the sun was shining, and then there was this rain. And it was so beautiful, you know, with the sun shining and the rain and this little sound of the rain. And I thought, oh, it made everything seem very light. Yeah? And I thought, oh, that's the kind of state of mind I want to have. You know, this kind of light mind. Instead of, you know? And so what makes our mind kind of light, I think, well, definitely in addition to wisdom, the 4 immeasurables. Yeah? Because when we can really look at others with eyes of kindness and eyes of appreciation and really, you know, have a good attitude towards others, then anywhere we go and any person we're with, we can feel happy and we can feel connected to those, you know, whoever it is. Yeah? When we have attachment, our mind is saying, I'm only happy when I'm with that person. Only that person. Well, maybe 2 or 3 more. But, you know, if I'm not with that handful of people, I can't be truly happy. Whereas when we've really spent time cultivating the four immeasurables in an equal way and really seeing sentient beings' kindness, in a big way, then whoever we're with, we can feel a heart connection with that person. And we don't feel alienated and, like I don't belong, but we can, we feel connected to other people and appreciate them. And then of course wisdom is an important thing. Wisdom also adds that quality of lightness to our mind. Many of you were here when we did the Manjushri initiation. If you do Manjushri practice, there's some inner quality of just this kind of lightness that comes. Okay, then relationships with lay people. So we've talked about some of this before, like with our family, really expressing our gratitude to our family, reminding them that we're always their child, but not being really close to them. Okay? And so not getting involved in family dramas, not listening to who said this and that, not being emotionally dependent on our family, not getting hooked by old, patterns of behavior in the family. This can be very, very difficult, because these patterns of behavior, they're just so habitual we don't even notice them. Yeah. And so to notice them, to change, to relate to our family in a friendly way, a pleasant way, a warm way, but not get all emotionally stuck and involved. Okay? But to see them as, sentient beings just like everybody else. Because part of the difficulty sometimes when we have problems, our problems with family members, not just they're trying to hook us or things, but our problems with them. What was I going to say? It was something about that. What was? Oh yes, that our problems with, like, our parents, or for example, because our parents are really important people in our lives. Their kindness to us was really tremendous. Was we see them as my parents, and my parents should do this and this and this and this and this and this and this, because this is the kind of parent I want. Yeah. But my parents aren't filling my list of what I think they should be. Yeah. But, and so then we start with all this judgment and all this and that my parents aren't what I want them to be, and I feel deprived for that reason, and na. And it's often very helpful if you step back and instead of giving that person the label, my mother or father, just say, human being. Yeah, there's that human being with that kind of personality or those kind of habitual actions. Yeah. Now, how would I relate? Like if it was the person down the street who had those habits and reactions, would I be as disturbed by that behavior as I would when I label it my mother or my father? No. No, clearly not. It's just with these close family relationships, we put so much on the other people. Yeah. I remember one of my big difficulties in late teens, early 20s was my parents don't accept me for who I am. Actually, that's still what's happening. Except now I'm much more at ease about it. But that situation really hasn't changed. You know, the family doesn't accept me for who I am. But it was like, then I realized, you know, I'm not accepting them for who they are. Yeah? I'm wanting my mother to be different. I'm wanting my father to be different. You know, I want my brother to be different. I want my sister to be different. Yeah? The dog was the only one I loved unconditionally. And who loved me unconditionally. Just the dogs and the cats. Everybody else I wanted to change. Yeah? And so it's really helpful when you just don't label it my parent and just see it, you know, if this were somebody else's mother or father, how would I look at that person? Would I have the same strong emotional reactions? No. We would be a lot more just accepting of, okay, they do that, or they don't do this, or whatever. Yeah, we wouldn't get nearly as bent out of shape. And so thinking like that really can give us so much internal space. Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that maybe this is a problem, that we should try to cultivate an equal amount of compassion for a parent, a close one, a brother, whatever, a relative with a certain affliction, as we would for a stranger with a friend.
Definitely. Same compassion. Whether it's a person who we see often and care a lot about, or it's a stranger. You know, to really equalize, because this equalizing of our feelings, you know, love and compassion, is really important. You can't generate bodhicitta without it. Yeah, you can't generate bodhicitta if your mind plays favorites.
What about when you recognize that someone close to you has a very kind of attachment to you? The other time, how do you deal with that compassionately?
Okay, so when somebody has a strong attachment to us, yeah, and we don't have that same strong attachment, or we feel like that attachment is rather stifling.
Right, we still love that person, but we don't have the same. I mean, you know the difference, right?
Yeah.
Pulling you, wants to pull you.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they have a lot of expectations about us. You know, there's a lot of hooks coming our way. And, you know, some clinging, and you've got to do this, and I need you to be this kind of person. And so, you know, very attached to us. And then how do we deal with that? We stay cool, you know. And the thing is, in our mind, you know, that family member, whoever it is, all sentient beings have been my mother. Yeah, all sentient beings have been my father. And you know, they're suffering from attachment. I don't need to be deliberately rebellious, but I'm not going to be influenced by this. You know, I'm going to set, you know, I'm going to be who I am, and through my behavior and through how I speak, let them know kind of who I am, where I'm going in life, what my decisions are, and remain completely cool when they give advice that I don't want to hear. You know, they give advice, you say, thank you very much. You don't engage and try and debate it, and why that isn't right and why that isn't wrong, because they got you then. You know, don't they? Or not that they've got us. We're chewing on that hook. Yeah, we bit the hook. Yeah, and it's just, you know, this is what I'm doing. This is how things are. I love you, and yeah, I'm a grown-up now. Yeah, it's like really hard for parents, I think, when their kids grow up. Really hard for them. Yeah, Because we're always somehow, they love us, i.e., it's a parental love, which is very mixed with attachment, that they want to protect us from everything, and it's like, I don't want to be protected from everything. I want to have some space and live my life and learn from my own way of living. You're coming from a good place, you want to protect me, but hey, parents, and I say this often in public talks, you cannot protect your child from suffering. Your duty was to bring your child up and give them an education and good values and set a good example and teach them how to deal with situations. And then you got to back off because you can't control them.
Thinking of my parents in India.
Yeah. No, it's extremely difficult.
51 is still mind revolted.
Oh, yeah. I remember when my dad was in his 60s and my grandma was telling him, put on your jacket so you don't catch cold, And it's like you're always the kid. So in their eyes, we can't change them. We're always the baby in their eyes. But we can change how we act, and we can change how, we just don't relate in that way. Yeah? And we just keep our cool. This is who I am, this is how I'm living. That's great, you can have that idea. You can have that wish for me to become this, that, and the other thing. I'm me. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with respect to Manny's question and what you were saying earlier, is like separating it, like it's not my parent, but like you think about your friend, and your friend, and you know your friend, and you know their passion and their aspiration, and then you hear that their parents saying, you should do this, you should do that, and you're just like, that's absurd. It just doesn't even make any sense. There's no hook at all. You're just like, that's absurd. And if you just apply that to yourself, like look at it from the outside and how absurd that would be, and then also when you were what you were talking about earlier, with not looking at it as my parent, I've noticed that like when I have friends that come to visit, or my sister's husbands come, and they think my parents are just charming and cute, a little goofy, but they just think it's it's like, and it's so nice. It's kind of like going on a walk with a puppy or something. They think everything's exciting. You like look at then your parents through your friend's eyes, and it's like, oh yeah, they're just kind of goofy and silly, and there's just not all that weight with it.
Yeah, that's the thing, to take off all that weight and expectation. Yeah, and just accept them for who they are, They had all their own stuff going on in their life. Yeah, that we can't control. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I'm not responsible, I was so hard to do to hold that in my mind.
Yeah, because she was breaking up, and he was writing her all these love letters, and even after you ordained, and writing all these letters, and yeah, yeah, and I said, he's not talking to you. It's just, you don't answer. Just don't answer. That, you've chosen what you're going to do. You don't have to take care of his feelings. Anyway, you're not the proper person to take care of his feelings. Yeah, if he wants to, to talk to somebody else about what he's feeling, it can't be you. He can't go to you and say, I'm so unhappy because my girlfriend broke up with me, and then you kind of counsel him and pat him on the back. That's not going to work, So it's the same thing with our parents. We are not responsible for their emotions. Yeah, and it is difficult for them. Yeah, because we're always their baby. And they always want the best for us. And so to realize that's how they're viewing life, and, give our parents some time to grow up. That's my motto. If you give your parents time, they'll grow up. Yeah, I mean, my parents eventually did. They went from, you know, not speaking to me for years and years and years to secretly kind of telling other people how proud they were of me, but never to my face. So, you know, it's like, yeah, we wish people not to suffer, but hey, we can't control it. We can't control it. Okay, and what else? Okay, so we've already talked a little bit about, you know, wearing your robes everywhere and people noticing it. And I think it's quite important for people to wear their robes all the time, you know? I'll just tell you the few times when I didn't wear my robes. The first time I went to see my parents after I ordained, you know, they hadn't spoken to me for years. They called Italy, where I was living in a Dharma center at that time, and said, come for your brother's wedding. Lama Yeshe was coming right after that, so I asked Lama what to do. And he said, you go back and be California girl. Like, I don't want to be California girl, Lama. I'm sick of being California girl. Nobody said, you go back and you be nice to your parents, yeah, and you look normal. And like they said, so my hair, I had to let my hair get a little longer. All the women at the Institute played dress up to find some clothes for me to wear, so I didn't have any lay clothes. Yeah, so we played dress up, found a few things for me to wear. I wore my robes on the plane. Before we landed at LAX, I changed into, you know, whatever. I got off the plane, and my parents were there, and then I realized Lama's wisdom, because if I had come with a shaved head in my robes, my mother would have gone hysterical in the middle of the airport. No, really, I think she just would have completely lost it. So yeah, that was Lama's wisdom. So, yeah. So I managed to be California girl for a little while, and then ran back to Asia as fast as I could and ditched those lay clothes. The only other times I've worn lay clothes is when I went into China. Yeah. So instead of wearing my robes, I was wearing, you know, the jacket that I have, or, you know, a jacket like that, and then I just put on maroon pants. So I did that. And a few places when I was traveling in China where I knew the police were looking, then I dressed like that instead of putting on my shemta. And then, of course, when we do manual labor here, yeah. But aside from that, I think it's really important to always wear our robes. There's some people, you know, who are self-conscious. What are people going to think of me? And, you know, I don't see it that way at all. I see it really as a way of, I mean, now in America, people do so many weird things anyway, you know. Now it's not even weird. People come up and say, hey, do you know the Dalai Lama? And you get to say yes. And they go, wow, you know, tell me more. So it becomes a way to establish contact. Okay. What have the two of you found about wearing your robes?
It also makes it easier to meet people, just for what you're saying, you know. And 99% of people are friendly and it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very conscious. And when we went to Newport, we were very well, all of very good things. But yeah, I'm quite surprised that they're very positive.
Yeah.
On your memory about somebody I know with a process that was doing, and then she made the decision first not to get a full together practice.
Mm-hmm.
But then we talk about this ordination for this option. You don't know what you want to do next. So in the past, and then he did that, and the patients actually, he was afraid that they will lose the contact with him, and that is what he was focused on. And so he was really focused on this.
Well, it sounds like he was living in a situation where he was working a job too. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then, yeah. Oh, then also another thing about in different situations, knowing when to stretch the parameters of our precepts a little bit and when not. Okay? For example, when I would go to visit my family, I had to watch TV because my parents were glued to the TV. And if I wanted to be with them, I had to sit in front of the TV and then in the commercials press the mute button, and we would talk during the commercials, and then when whatever came back on, then, you know. And that was kind of, I mean, sometimes we'd sit at the table and talk. By and large, it was, you know, I had to be around the TV to do it. Yeah? So there's different situations like that where you have to stretch your, you know, the boundaries of your precepts in order to communicate with different people. But it can also be a very slippery slope. So you have to be very attentive because what I found, okay, is I'll do it a little bit for my family, but not at all for friends. Because with friends, then it's just too easy, again, to get back into our old way of behaving together and what we did together. And then you see monastics say, well, you know, they're all going drinking or drugging, and I'll go, I just won't smoke or drink. Yeah, and this is a compassionate way to be with my old friends. And then I can talk to Dharma, about Dharma with them. Really? Really? I think that's baloney, personally, you know. I mean, maybe a certain very number of high, you know, practitioners who can see other people's mental states. Yeah, but for the rest of that's basically excuse. Yeah, and it really is a slippery slope. Yeah, because then your friends want not only this, but that, the other thing, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so, you know, usually you have to ask your parents' permission. My parents clearly didn't give their permission, but Lama thought it was okay because I was already old enough, you know, to make my own decisions, and because, you know, in our culture, it was different. I mean, in ancient India, you really were under your parents for a long time. You know, I mean, even the men, too. You would marry and then live in your parents' house. So, you know, so I think it's always better to have your parents' permission, you know, just because it eases things and makes things easier for you and for them. But I think in certain instances, you know, sometimes you have to go on without it. There's a very nice part of the Dharmaguptaka Shramanera ordination where we have the tablets. Chinese always have tablets representing your parents. We put them on the dresser, back there. And there's a time in the ceremony before you do the actual ordination where you go and you bow to your parents and you bid farewell to them, as symbolized by the tablets, and then you come back in the midst of the Sangha, having thanked your parents and said goodbye. I thought to just go over a little bit, very briefly, the qualifications for receiving monastic ordination, because there's a number of questions that you get asked when you ordain. There's a screening process. Okay? So the first one, it says, have you committed a border offense? And what this means is, have you taken the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts and broken any of the 4 first ones completely? Yeah, so having taken the 5 or the 8, broken the one, killed a human being, stole something of value, unwise or unkind sexual behavior, in the case of the 8 precepts, having intercourse, and then lying about spiritual attainments. So if you've done that, then then the Vinaya master usually will consider whether it's still okay to ordain you or whether you're disqualified. Yeah. The idea being that if somebody has, broken something from the root, then are they going to be able to keep it in the future? So the Vinaya master usually kind of looks at that and, they know the person and, can that person go on, and are they different now, or are they just still acting the same way?
So, border offense, so that's not like you lied once.
No, it's a particular kind of lying where you lie about your spiritual attainments.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the killing, to break it from the root, is killing from a human being. The stealing isn't just taking a paper clip, it's something of value so that the government in the place where you're living would get involved. Okay. Yeah, so like that. Okay, and then second is, have you ruined the pure conduct of a bhikshu or a bhikshuni? In other words, have you slept with somebody who was a monk or a nun? Yeah, so that disqualifies you. Are you a thief entering the Buddhist path? Here, thief refers to somebody who it can be somebody who puts on robes without being ordained. Yeah, someone who claims to be a novice or a fully ordained person in order to get the privileges and rights of them. So people, you have this in Asia, people, also I read an article that people in New York were doing it, putting on robes, pretending to be a Buddhist monastic, and panhandling. So if you do that, that disqualifies you from being a monastic. Another so that's the basic thing. Okay. So knowing that you shouldn't do this, doing it. Or another way of doing it is, you shouldn't listen to the Sangha karmas, but you do. The Sangha karmas are the monastic transactions that we do. And so listening in, it's when we make our formal decisions. And so it's not open to the people who are not fully ordained to listen into those. So knowing you shouldn't, but going ahead and doing that. Okay, are you a person breaking outer and inner path? Okay, inner path refers to the Buddhist path, outer path refers to the non-Buddhist. So breaking inner and outer path means you were once a follower of another religion, then you become a Buddhist, then you go back to being somebody of another religion. Okay, so your mind's not very stable in terms of what your spiritual practice is. So somebody who's wobbly like that is disqualified. Are you a eunuch? Yeah. So, one of the things is people have to be gender specific when they ordain. Yeah, you have to know, which bathroom do you go in? And I know this is a big topic in modern society, yeah, and transgender people and all of this. And I really don't know how it's going to pan out in terms of Buddhism, because it's, the teachings are very clear. You have to be gender specific. Okay, then 6 is, have you committed patricide? So have you killed your father? 7, have you killed your mother? 8, have you killed an arhat? We're going through the 5 heinous actions here. 9, have you caused schism in the harmonious sangha? 10, have you wickedly caused the Buddha to shed blood? And then 11 is, are you a non-human being? So this is referring to, there's certain nagas and gods that can appear as human beings even though they're not, but only human beings are allowed to take ordination. Are you an animal? So this refers, again to animals who can transform and appear as human beings. They have ways. Yeah, when you change clothes, I guess. I don't know how you check if you're an animal or not. They're counting on you telling the truth. I mean, if you lie during these questions and then it gets discovered later, then your ordination is invalid. You're out. So, then 13, are you a person who has both male and female organs? So again, this thing of, having to be gender specific. So the 13 are summarized in 4 main points. First, the intention to ordain must be pure. Okay? And, you're not dressing up as somebody, you're not putting on a show, you're not faking it in some way. You must have a genuine, pure ordination. Second is the person must be gender specific. Third is the person must not have done a serious destructive action, because, then there's a chance they could do that again. And then fourth, they must be able to practice the Dharma properly and receive its benefits by being mentally and physically capable. Okay? So if a person has mental illness, they should be disqualified. This is some difficulty, in the West with the Tibetan Geshis who ordain people, because they don't speak the same language, and the Tibetans feel it's better for somebody to be ordained one day in this degenerate age rather than your whole life at the time of the Buddha. So they're very open to ordain anybody who comes along. And so it's happened several times that people, with severe mental illnesses get ordained. And then it really creates a problem for, if they live in a community, it creates a problem. And it also creates a problem for the lay people, because they're not acting like monastics, even though they're wearing robes. When I lived in Dharamsala, there was one woman who, I don't know what she had, but her robes were like very high, kind of like up to her knees or somewhere like that. And she would stand somewhere and smoke cigarettes, just like in a daze, like a catatonic thing, and smoking cigarettes. That kind of person shouldn't have been ordained to begin with. Yeah. I mean, they aren't a fit. They aren't going to be able to keep the precepts, let alone live in community. And of course, the Tibetan lay people were quite unhappy about it. Yeah?
What about physical disability?
Yeah, if somebody has a very pronounced physical disability, if they're, if they're severely crippled, so that they, I know crippled isn't the politically correct, or the correct word. What's the correct word? Huh? Disabled, thank you. So if they're very severely disabled, then they're not going to be able to keep up with the Sangha activities. You know, you make the sign for everybody to come for a Sangha karma. They're not able to get there because they can't walk so well. Okay, so something like that. Although I do know, you know, somebody who was in a wheelchair and got ordained. But it creates difficulties, I think. And people could say, oh, well, the Buddhists aren't very compassionate. Yeah. So then I think you have to see, well, if the person's able to kind of get around and do all the other things that the Sangha's doing with that disability, then that's fine. But if they aren't able to, yeah, then, you know, it's also the person themselves will be very unhappy. Yeah. Similarly, if somebody's very, very sick, yeah, they should, you know, they aren't allowed to ordain, because then it becomes, you know, a big weight on the community. And the story that happened at the time of the Buddha was there was one doctor, Javaka, and he offered to give free medical services to the Sangha. So then all these people started ordaining so that they could go to the doctor and get free medical services. Yeah? And so then the Buddha had to say, if you're, you know, severely ill, you can't ordain, because it was like taking advantage of Javaka's generosity. Okay? Yeah?
I think there was one about being from another continent.
Yeah, people from the northern continent can't ordain. Yeah, but if you're living in the northern continent, I guess you're not going to be on our southern continent. Yeah, there's a few others. So those ones were ones that really cut you off from being ordained. The next ones are, they can be a temporary obstacle, but then if you get rid of it, then it's okay to ordain. So first was being a slave or a servant, or in the government, a government official whereby the king, the government, the army, somebody else had power over you. So clearly that would be uncomfortable if that same person became a monastic. Here it has being a thief, you know. Now how you would remedy the situation of being a thief, I don't know. So then the third one is being in debt. Yeah, so if you have any debts, not to ordain, unless there is a really crystal clear way of repaying the debt, you know. And the reason why is otherwise the debt collectors come to the monastery. And that happened in France when I lived there. They ordained some monk who had debts, and the debt collector came to the monastery. And that's like, I mean, then what do the surrounding lay people think about the monastery? You know? And so we had a situation with somebody where they received a very definite government stipend every month. They had a very small debt, and it was already set up for an amount each month to be taken out of their account to repay the debt. And it was a government stipend that wasn't going to change, that was going away. So we said, yes, that's fine, because it only required like another 6 months to pay it off, you know. But somebody who has, you know, we had somebody come here with like $20,000 in student loans, and said, I want to ordain. And I said, what about repaying your loans? And they said, well, if I don't repay them in 25 years, then the government excuses it. And I said, excuse me, but you know, that money belongs to somebody else. It doesn't belong to you. And you're responsible for repaying it. You know, so a person who talks like that has no appreciation for receiving the money and the fact that it belongs to others and that they have some responsibility to repay it. So I said, no, you have to go out and work and repay your loan. Yeah. Because I think, you know, people need to be responsible. And anyway, You know, I mean, how's that going to look for the monastery? Somebody has $20,000 in student loans and says, well, forget it. Somebody, you know, they'll excuse it, you know. And here are all the local taxpayers, you know, who are paying the taxes for that loan, who, you know, are working hard. That's not going to go over well. Okay, so then having serious diseases, so there's a list of serious diseases, or having mental illness, that is a temporary hindrance. Not having the permission of your parents, so that can be a thing. Being a royal servant, again, because the king has power over you. Not having bowls and your bowl and a robe, and your robes. So very important when you ordain, you have to have your robes, you have to have a bowl. Yeah. And then being motivated by defilement. So there's a part in the ceremony where you're asked your name, and you're asked the name of your preceptor, and somebody's too proud. You know, I don't need to say my name. I don't need to, you know, answer this question. So they don't have a proper motivation. And then, or another way of being motivated by defilement, refusing to request ordination. Because again, there's before the ceremony you have to request, during the ceremony you have to request, and somebody being too full of themselves, you know, well, I deserve this, I don't have to request. You know, you're obliged to give me the ordination. And also somebody wearing lay clothes, robes from other religions, or jewelry. Again, you know, how are you going to take robes if you're not dressed, you know, how are you going to take ordination if you're not dressed properly? Okay, so those 16 are summarized in 5 main points. First, we must have clarified our relationships and fulfilled our responsibilities. Yeah? So that makes sense. You repay your debt, you've clarified things with your parents, you know, things are settled. And if you do that before you ordain, then your ordination life is so much easier. Yeah? And I think with the parents, another thing that I saw, I want to share this, is I've had a few friends whose parents were very supportive of them ordaining and would send them money every month and basically supported them as monastics. However, you know, I mean, that was very nice. They received support. However, then the family wants to go on family vacation, and they expected their son or daughter, who's a monastic, to go with them on family vacation. The family has to have dinner, has dinner on Sunday nights. We want you to come for family dinner on Sunday nights. You know, the family got them a house. You know, the house has to be furnished in this way. So there were a lot of strings. Yeah. So I don't think that's very helpful for ordination. You can't function as a free agent. It's very kind of your parents to benefact, but it came with all those strings. So if a parent makes offerings, you know, like your mom and dad, when they came here, they made offerings. It was very clear. Yeah, that's fine. But when people try and control through money, then that doesn't work in a Sangha community. Okay, then you must, second thing of these 5 main points, you must be sincere in wanting to learn the Dharma and the Vinaya. Third, you must have the necessities of robes and a bowl. 4, you must have a pure intention to be ordained, not wanting to escape something or ditching something. And 5, you must be mature enough. Okay.